Fortunate that Hong Kong has been hit negatively by so many negative headwinds. For example, you mentioned the social unrest that certainly has discouraged tourists from coming to the island to avoid all that. Now, of course, you have the coronavirus and the closing of the borders. Remember that almost 75% of all the visitors into Hong Kong come from the mainland in China. And so if they're now trying to discourage those visitors, that means there's going to be less and less of those purchases. And that's one of the reasons why the hotels and the retail sectors are under so much pressure right now, and likely to continue to be under that kind of pressure until the coronavirus is put under control, which I expect will happen sometime over the next couple of months. But that's not going to help the first calendar quarter for Hong Kong.
And as you mentioned, on top of the political unrest, now the coronavirus outbreak, how do you see the measures being taken so far impacting Hong Kong?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. How do you see the measures that have been taken so far to try and, obviously, closing the borders and things, how do you see that impacting Hong Kong's economy?
I think it's a real big challenge to close those borders. Given that relationship with China, obviously China's not too happy about closing the borders. The people in Hong Kong want those borders closed. So my suspicion is that it's really a tight rope. I think the compromise was solid in the sense that they didn't close all the borders, but they restricted it, and they're going to be monitoring the situation. But the bottom line for Hong Kong's economy, it's going to be a negative, because any restriction of visitors from China will certainly hurt the economic growth. But obviously, you had the concern of the healthcare workers. So it's a really difficult situation. The good news is that we know that these viruses are temporary in nature, whether it was SARS, whether it's this one, whether it's MERS, whether it's the Ebola virus. They don't last for a long, long time. And my suspicion is that given that this virus is less severe in the sense that the death rate is about 2%, and in fact, I think the number is actually lower, because we know there may be some unreported cases, people that maybe don't have real symptoms or not reporting them. So that means that the death rate is a lot smaller than SARS. Instead of saying 2% versus 10%, it's probably going to be, at the end of the day, something in the neighborhood of 1 to 1.5%.
And obviously, it's a terrible time in terms of it also happening during the Lunar New Year holiday. What are we seeing in terms of its impact on holiday spending, a time when usually people are out buying gifts for each other?
There is no question that it's going to have a negative impact on retail sales. In China, for example, I expect retail sales will be cut maybe in as much as half of what it was on average over the last couple of months. We're going to see the same thing in Hong Kong. Already you're hearing some retail establishments talking about laying off employees, closing down stores, renegotiating rents in order to basically adjust to the new reality that Hong Kong sales activity is going to be a lot weaker than it otherwise would have been. So it's a real sad situation. The good news is that this is temporary in nature. I suspect that in the second half of the year, you will see a little bit of a rebound. I know a lot of people are comparing the current virus with the SARS virus, but I don't think it's comparing apples to apples. It's less deadly, and that's good news for everyone, but it's more contagious. And remember that that's what really raises consumer angst or consumer anxiety when you see so many people getting the virus. Even though it may not be as deadly, more people getting sick gets people nervous. They don't want to go outside to restaurants. They don't want to stay in hotels. So it is very negative in the short run, but in terms of the ultimate impact, we know that there will be a recovery, but I don't think the recovery is as quick either for the Chinese economy or even for the Hong Kong economy when you compare what happened in SARS, which ended a lot quicker, and even though it was a lot more severe. This one may take a little bit longer because that transmission rate is a little bit higher, that contagious rate, than the prior SARS epidemic.
All right, thank you.